Well, hello and welcome to episode 21 of Mr. K is Wrong. And this podcast looks at the Facebook posts of a person, who I used to know back in my high school days, who was right wing. And he's gone further and further down that rabbit hole. And I debunk his stuff that I find on his Facebook page. So, what's the current right wing meme that he posted? It says, and I quote, "For some reason, when Biden was firing federal workers for refusing the vaccine, not one Democrat spoke up. But firing federal workers for wasting taxpayer money is the end of democracy as we know it, according to the Democrats." End quote. So, what's wrong with that particular meme? Well, it's pretty straightforward. It's a pretty easy meme to break down and debunk, and I'm going to try to do that step by step. Like many viral political memes, this one distorts facts, makes false equivalencies, and oversimplifies complex issues to stoke outrage. So, here's my little breakdown of what's misleading about it. So, claim one is Biden fired federal workers for refusing the vaccine, and no Democrats spoke up. So, here are the facts about that. President Biden did not unilaterally fire all federal workers who refused the COVID 19 vaccine, at least from what I understand. In September 2021, Biden issued an executive order requiring most federal employees to be vaccinated, with limited exemptions for religious or medical reasons. So, there are some reasons why that's actually not as controversial as some would have you believe. For one thing, vaccines have long been a part of some institutions in our country, such as the military, right? The vaccine usage in the United States military actually goes back quite a long way. And in this case, workers who refused without an approved exemption could face disciplinary action, including termination, but the process was not immediate or universal. Many federal agencies used progressive disciplinary processes, including counseling or suspension, and in some cases, eventually termination would have been on the table. So, what about Democrats? How do they respond? Several Democrats did express concerns about the mandate, which you might expect because there are differences of opinion. Senator Joe Manchin, for example, who is a Democrat from West Virginia, opposed mandates and asked for more flexibility. Now, I'm going to put aside my usual critiques of Joe Manchin because this isn't really about that. And we're just noting that he was one of the people who questioned the mandate. Some union backed Democrats advocated for negotiation and due process before disciplinary actions, which, complicates the meme's claims quite a bit. Additionally, federal employee unions like the American Federation of Government Employees actually pushed back, and Democratic lawmakers often support such unions. So it's actually been debunked because Democrats were not silent, at least not entirely. The reality is more nuanced, involving legal exemptions, due process, and labor protections. So the meme is inaccurate, as so often happens. That's what you risk doing if you get all of your information from, a social media uh, meme. So claim number two is firing federal workers for wasting taxpayer money is now the end of democracy, according to Democrats. So this is a straw man fallacy. No Democrat is arguing for firing workers for, or is arguing that firing workers for wasting money is necessarily undemocratic. The real debate often surrounds who decides what counts as waste and whether workers are being targeted for political reasons or legitimate misconduct. See, that is the difference, and that context definitely matters. When conservative politicians claim to be firing federal workers for waste, it often involves eliminating entire departments or silencing dissenters, which can raise alarms about abuse of executive power. And that's where the questions of abuse come from. The nature of executive power makes it so that some people want a bit of due process here and better definitions of what constitutes waste. Because just in the past few days, Donald Trump has said that he wants to actually expand the military budget to $1 trillion. And the military is actually quite well known for having a lot of waste, fraud, and abuse as, you know, part of its structure. In fact, it has failed all seven of its last audits. I don't remember the exact amount of money that is being unaccounted for, but it's a huge chunk of the military budget that is not being properly allocated. And there's a lot of waste, and there's no doubt some fraud, and the military is sort of, by its very nature, I guess you could say, abusive, because what does it do? It invades other countries, and it's definitely corruptly being used because of all the corporate ties that the military has. It's even been called the military industrial complex. And by now, it also could be called the military industrial prison complex because it's being used by the executive power right now to funnel all of these different immigrants into places like Guantanamo Bay or this weird place in El Salvador, and they don't want due process for that. So somehow that is okay. But if if you're a person who wants these different departments to provide humanitarian aid abroad, or if you want to have national parks being protected or environmental laws or anything like that, that's automatically waste, fraud, or abuse. So, yeah, this is a meme that really misses the mark, to say the least. And, during the Trump administration's first term, there were concerns about retaliatory firings of watchdogs, scientists, and whistleblowers, which did prompt criticism from Democrats and even some Republicans, not because the individuals wasted money, but because they were seen as politically inconvenient. These people who were facing punishment from the Trump administration. So that argument has been debunked. Democrats have actually opposed authoritarian overreach, at least in many cases. Obviously, you can find some individual Democrats who don't really care about that as much, but the idea that they never have opposed authoritarian overreach is laughable. In fact, they often do want accountability. So, really, it should also simply be noted that equating these two things is kind of disingenuous. Obviously, the issue of vaccines or vaccine mandates is sort of inherently different from, I just want to fire all these different departments and have no due process. I mean, they're kind of different issues. So to sort of jumble them in together is sort of sloppy right off the bat. There's a lot of pitfall potential in doing that because they are such different issues. But I guess the main point of that is to be disingenuous in this case, to sort of make it seem that, if you scrap an entire department or defund something like Medicare or Social Security, it's no different somehow from, saying, oh, there should be vaccine mandates. Well, the two topics are actually significantly different, and it seems pretty obvious right on the surface, at least for a lot of people. So there are things that the meme ignores entirely, such as due process actually matters, firing federal employees, whether over vaccines, budget misuse, or misconduct, requires legal procedures, and to an extent, it should be on a case by case basis. The fact that there were so many mass firings kind of suggests that these things were not being well thought out in Trump's second term. And intent and context are key. Public health measures during a pandemic are not the same as politically motivated purges. There's a false equivalence there. The meme tries to compare a public health emergency to vague claims of fiscal waste, two completely different issues with different stakes. So the final verdict is that the meme relies on false equivalence, misleading framing, and oversimplification to promote a partisan narrative. It ignores nuance, legal procedures, and real democratic politician responses, and instead substitutes emotional provocation for actual argument. So if you're seeing memes like this, it's always worth asking, what are the facts behind each claim? Who benefits from this framing? And is it making a real argument or just trying to manipulate emotions? And, that's about all I have to say about the topic. And if you have a difference of opinion, I guess you could reach out to me in the comments section if there's a comment section available, or just alert me on social media, or if you can track down my email address, you can let me know your opinion. Just try to be civil and try to be intelligent. I mean, if you're trying to prove that you're more intelligent than me, that's okay, but actually put an effort into doing that. Just calling me stupid or something, that's not going to do the trick. You're going to have to do better than that. All right. So, all right. Probably do another episode next week, and I'm not sure what it will be about, but I will be looking at Mr. K's stupid memes or some of his original posts on his Facebook wall, and hopefully they won't make me cringe too hard.